Good afternoon, everybody. Thursday, that means it's story time with Mary. This is Mary Miller from Seatuck Environmental Center. You may notice that I'm ready for an adventure. Take a look. Life preserve. I have some other equipment. A paddle. This is the big one for an adult. I also have some smaller ones from when the kids join us in the canoe. So the name of the story today is 3 Days on a River in a Red Canoe. So what's a canoe? If you haven't seen a canoe before, I have a model of one. Okay, mine is not a red. You can see, I think you can see the color. This one is, yep, it's green. And here's what the inside looks like. It's where people sit on the seats. Here is the back seat, the stern of the boat. And here is the front seat, that's in the bow. That's where I usually sit. And this model, this canoe model, even has little paddles, just like my paddles. Okay, so now, if we're going on an adventure, then we do need to bring a lot of equipment, and our book will certainly show us all that. That's a lot of fun, putting together all the supplies you need for a canoe trip. I'll show you some of mine. Okay, here's my Sierra Club cup. This can be used for a cup or a bowl. That was very handy on all of our trips. And can you guess what this is? This piece of equipment, it's aluminum. And it has the outside, kind of gives you a clue as to what it is for. Can you guess what that's for? It's for carrying something that you might make for breakfast over your campfire. Yes, inside we put our eggs. And that's how when we're packing. And this is our old coffee pot for heating up water on the fire at our campsite. And let's see what else I have here. Oh, this goes back to my college days. So my college has a camp in the Adirondacks, and as part of my college program, I visited that camp, and it was late May, which is black fly season. And black fly season can be pretty intense. So it has netting, so you'd wear it on your head, and the netting would go over your face and rest on your shoulders. So that's the old bug net. It was only that one trip that I needed for. Fortunately, none of our other canoe trips required the use of a bug net. Now this one is something that I made. I was reading some tips prior to one of our camping trips, and we did a lot. We did all kinds of, just camping, and sometimes camping and canoeing. And it meant that we were staying either in a wilderness area or in a state park where we had sinks and, regular bathrooms. So I got this idea, which I thought was so great, and it was very easy to put together. I'm not someone who is good with sewing, but this was actually a cloth diaper, which is very absorbent, and I just attached, I guess it was like a shoelace or something like that, so that it could be hung around the back of their neck. This would hang around the back of their neck, and then it's basically their towel for when they were in the bathroom. So they could hang it and have it handy rather than their towel falling all over the floor, et cetera, et cetera. So I loved that thing, and it really it really worked very well. So that's some of our equipment that we used for our camping trips. And here are just a couple of pictures that were taken. So basically, this is a canoe, and it happens to be me in the bow with my husband, and that's a big, probably a Grumman aluminum canoe. And this picture was taken in the area, probably North Carolina, in Merchants Mill Pond, I believe. Just beautiful, where the trees just grow right out of the water. So places we went in canoes that we could just never go without being in a canoe or a kayak. So we did lots of canoe trips. We did them with our children. Once we had 2 girls, and they would sit in the middle, and they would, of course, have their turns to paddle as the years went on. And here's some other pictures. This one is not a canoe picture, but rather a kayak picture. And this one was in Florida. It was pretty cold. You can see I have gloves on and a pretty heavy jacket, but you can paddle, in different types of temperatures. And you can see the type of paddle is different from the canoe. So the canoe, you're holding one hand like the paddles I showed you, and paddling one on one side. The other person paddles on the other side. And the person in the back is the person who steers. I would just give the manpower all the way with my paddling. And then, so anyway, this kind of paddle has a paddle on both ends. So you dip in to the right and you dip in to the left. You can see the paddle here in another kayak, and both are great. I mean, a kayak, I feel like I have a lot more control paddling. I can, turn it a little better than when I've tried to do my stern paddling. It's challenging. It's good to learn. So anyway, we'll get started with our story in just a moment. I'll just retrace my steps around the table. Unfortunately, we couldn't be outside again. It seems on Thursday it either gets really windy, so it would eat up our sound, or it was like last week it was raining. But so I'm in my indoor room here, and we'll get started with our story in just a moment. So as I work my way over to the book, I'll tell you a little bit about Seatuck. If you don't already know, the Seatuck Environmental Association is a nonprofit and is involved in all sorts of conservation projects and all sorts of nature activities, family programs, education programs. There'll be an eco-carnival online in a couple of weeks, Saturday the 25th of April, and that you can check in on. And every weekday at 2:30, just like now, there will be an activity, generally outside, but I couldn't be out there today, so we're as close as we can be to the outside. All right, so let's get started. Again, my name is Mary Miller, and we're part of the Seatuck Environmental Association afternoon outdoor activities. Okay, 3 days on a river in a Red Canoe by Vera B. Williams. Okay, now we've picked up a lot of books. The last books I read to you, as well as this one, we picked up while we were traveling, doing canoe trips, doing just visits to friends in other states. So always take a look in the stores when you travel, and you might find some, interesting stories that really support what you were doing and tell stories about things that you enjoy. Okay, so 3 days. I mean, you could go out for a paddle in a canoe or a kayak if you have access to one, or you go somewhere where you can rent them and just go out for a day, of course. It doesn't have to be a big commitment. But this book gives a nice story about a first-time experience for 2 children with 2 adults. So here we go. So the sign says, "For sale, ask at house." And the little child there says, "I was the one who first noticed the red canoe for sale in a yard on the way home from school." And there's the canoe. My mom, my Aunt Rosie, and my cousin Sam and I put our money together and bought it. The people sold it to us threw in 2 paddles and 2 big old life jackets. So here are the paddles, like the ones I showed you. And here are the life jackets, like the one I'm wearing, just a little different color. And look at well, we can't even see the adult faces because they're carrying the canoe in the right way. That's the way you carry it when you're walking over land if you're going a long distance. And I actually have a photograph here of a trip we were on, and this was carrying the canoe. It was going to be literally over a mile because we got to a place where there was a big waterfall and all the canoes had to be carried. So this was my husband learning how to properly carry the canoe, pretty heavy, and go up and down the hills to put the canoes back in the water where it would be safe on the other side. Now let's take a picture, take a look over here. We've got a map, which is really important if you are going to be traveling, whether on land or on water. And you might know that a map, very often the color tells you what you're looking at. So if you see green, think about what that might be showing you. Could be trees, it could be grass, and the blue, you might know also, is the water. So right here is the path. It even says here, good starting place, the red dot on the blue, and it shows the route that they're planning to take. The water winds around and around. It says, watch for the waterfalls. And over here, mosquitoes, maybe they have head nets. Bad here, mosquitoes by the swamp. And let's see, they pointed out a nice campsite along the way. And over here is a dam and a portage. That means, just like the picture I showed you, that's when they're carrying the canoe to get safely to another area where they can put the canoe back in. As soon as we got home with the canoe, Aunt Rosie and Mom took out their maps. The canoe trips they had taken before Sam or I was even born were marked in colors. They found a 3-day trip that could be just right for us. Then we made lists of what we needed. Then we went shopping. Here are Sam and I in the store in our new life jackets. So of course, everybody has to wear a life jacket in a canoe or any type of boat. They cost a lot, but Mom and Aunt Rosie agreed we had to have them. And an extra paddle and 20 feet of new rope. Wonder what that new rope would be for. Maybe we can find out as we read the story. We also bought some packages of freeze-dried chicken and some dried apricots. Because guess what? There's no refrigerator when they get on the road. So they have foods that are called freeze-dried, so they'll be able to add water and enjoy them when they're on the trip. Okay, so wow. Hi, Amanda. There is a lot of equipment that has to be packed for 4 people on a 3-day trip. So let's see, what do you see here? Looks like some bottles, cups, a little different from the ones I showed you that I have. And here's dried fruits and there's a recipe and supplies for making pancakes while they're camping out. And all sorts of things. Let's see, looks like a flashlight, good idea. An axe. I wonder if that little box is the matches for starting their fire. And those round things are probably canteens, and there's the rope. It looks a little like a snake, the way they've laid it on the ground in a safe way. And an old-fashioned kind of backpack. And let's look down here. Whoa, wait a minute. There's a cat laying on the sleeping bag. Do you think he's going with them? I doubt it. I don't think so. And here's some boots and more backpacks. Because remember, it's 4 people. They need lots of supplies, lots of equipment. So here is everything we need for the trip. The food is packed tight in waterproof sacks. My cat Six Toes is sitting on a sleeping bag. I wanted to take him, but Mom says a canoe is no place for a cat. I promised Six Toes to bring him back a fish. Next to my shoes and Sam's shoes are new pocket knives. We never even noticed Aunt Rosie buying them for us in the store today. Well, I'm sure they're going to learn all the safety factors with using their new pocket knives. Could come in handy. Okay, so it looks like they're on their way, so they're in the yellow car, and look where the canoe is. It's strapped on top. It looks like they're waving out the windows. So this page is kind of funny. I guess they had to go pretty far to their destination, to where they were going to start their trip. We drove and drove, and drove and drove, and drove and drove. Guess what? And drove and drove, drove and drove. And down at the bottom of the page, guess what? Yep, they drove a long distance. Let's see what's next. Oh, next page, guess what? And drove and drove. So here they are. It looks like they're at their campsite. They've parked pretty close to the water, so they'll be able to get the canoe right in. And it says, we drove all day. Now we're at the place Aunt Rosie and Mom had chosen for our first camp. We start on the river in the morning. Sam and I unloaded the car. Mom and Aunt Rosie put up the tent. We hurried to get inside before it got too dark and the mosquitoes took too many bites out of us. We lay in our tent, listening to the river. When I poked my head out in the morning, everything was wet, yet it wasn't even raining. We couldn't see our car. We could hardly see the river. What do you think it was? Why couldn't they see? They carried the canoe down to the water anyway. Now look at these pictures. They're actually like kind of fuzzy pictures. Why do you think they look fuzzy in the morning right by the water? And here's another picture. Still kind of fuzzy. I believe it was fog, like a cloud that's sitting on the ground. We're setting out for a small island it shows on the map. We've packed all our things into the canoe. We're going to fix our breakfast on the island when the sun warms up the river and dries up the mist. So the mist was like a fog. Okay. So this is a picture. It's a very colorful page. Their whole, of a good part of their trip, their first morning. And we'll go back and look at each part. First, this is where we come out of the mist. So now it's a nice clear day. Let's see. And here, they are making their first fire of the trip. So it looks like they've collected, what do they need for the fire? I see what they've collected. Some wood so that they can make a fire to cook their breakfast. And it looks like there are some little critters keeping an eye and watching. We've got a turtle, looks like, a bluebird, a fox. Oh, okay. So there they are, they did their breakfast. And then they continue on. And here it shows Sam tries paddling. So now one of the adults is in the middle, while one of the children is sitting in the bow or the stern, the front or the back, doing paddling. And now over here, it says, I try paddling. And they keep going around and around and around, just like the map showed us, that winding river. And they stopped somewhere. They pulled their canoe out of the water, and they said, we find crayfish. Have you ever seen crayfish? They look like little lobsters in the water. And here, Another nice little scene. We eat our lunch on top of this cliff. It's an apartment house for swallows. See the little holes in the side of the cliff? Do you know what a swallow is? I can show you a picture. Let me get that right over here. Here's a swallow. This one's called a cliff swallow. It's a little bird, and they make little openings in the side of the cliff. And they go in and out. Now they find a good swimming hole. There they are in the water. So they stop for some fun. And they go along. Oops, it's even cut off. We canoe on, I believe it says. Okay, now here they are in their red canoe. Here are Mom and Aunt Rosie paddling into a part of the river like a hot green tunnel. I fell asleep. I think Sam did too. It's good Mom and Rosie didn't, because they're paddling. Right here is where they heard the roaring of the waterfall, but they had been listening for it. It was marked on their maps. So what do they have to do if there's a waterfall? Are they going to stay in the canoe and go over the waterfall? So here, he's looking from a boulder, looking what a steep drop it is. Nope, we're not going to paddle there. And look at the way they managed to move the canoe. Remember that rope that they bought? Well, I see here's one way that they're using it. They tied to the ends of the canoe, and they're actually lowering it to the bottom so they can get back in the canoe safely in the water at the bottom of the waterfall. Aunt Rosie and Mom are lowering the canoe by ropes down over the waterfall. Sam and I climb up and down until we have carried all the gear to the bottom. We're going to camp here, even though it's still early. And guess what they did? They took advantage of the waterfall. And time for a shower. Looks like fun, right outside. Okay, so there's a lot of work to do when you're on a camping trip like this. And they've set up their own kitchen. Aunt Rosie is the cook tonight. We're going to try the crayfish we caught along with our chicken and rice. For dessert, Aunt Rosie showed us how to cook fruit stew and dumplings. This is the sink. You can stand right in it. The rocks made all the shelves and drain boards you need. We use the sand as scouring powder. So there's all the pots and pans, doing their chores, cleaning up, just like you do at home. Mom shows us some knots so we can use to tie up the canoe and putting up the tent. So there are different names for different types of knots, and the one that they learned was called a half hitch, 2 half hitches. And they learned how to do it so that they would be able to make knots that won't open and let the canoe run away. This book also shows some of the recipes they used while they were out camping. Some fun recipes, making dumplings, and some fruit stew using dried apricots, honey, and water. And they cooked it on the fire. And they mentioned, P.S., don't burn your tongue. We burned ours. Now, this is always a challenge when you go out, whether you're tenting in your backyard or tenting on a canoe trip or a hiking trip. So here you are, you've got all the poles, the pieces of the tent, and in this time, even though Mom and Aunt Rosie put the tent up the first night, now the children are putting up the tent by themselves. And here are some pictures. They've got it all spread out. It's a little complicated. And then they were getting the pegs in the ground. Here's some of my pegs. They're all bent because we banged them in the ground to hold the tent in place so it wouldn't blow away or fall down. And here's what it looks like. Pretty good, guys. Pretty good. They put the pegs in the ground to hold the lines. And he actually shows that he used a rock to bang in the pegs. And this picture shows a very important part of putting up a tent, is that there's a cloth on the outside, or it's called a fly. And here's a picture of one of our tents from one of our trips. And you see that outside piece of material right here, this outside on top. It doesn't touch the tent, but if it's raining, then the water just runs off and doesn't go in your tent. It's really important to have a fly on the tent. Okay, now we have a nighttime picture. What do you think they're doing? They're really huddled around. After supper, we build up our fire and sit beside it. Mom tells us stories about the animals that like the nighttime. We watch the stars and the sparks of our fire going up to join them. Here they are, sleeping in their sleeping bags. Sam isn't much of a weather predictor, but the rain didn't bother us. We put up the tent so well, hardly a drop of water came through. They did a good job with the fly. In the morning, big wind outside, right here in my house. In the morning, we sat up in our sleeping bags and ate crackers and raisins. Aunt Rosie made cocoa on the little camping stove. Yeah, you actually bring a stove with you when you camp. And you could use a fire, or you could use both. We set out on the river. Here we are. Oh my goodness, what's going on now? Can you see what's happening? We set out on the river with all our things, even though it was pouring rain. I'm shaking my paddle at the sky and yelling. What do you think he's yelling? Rain, please stop. They all have their rain gear on, though. They're well prepared. It's okay to be out in the rain, as long as you're prepared. And this reminds me so much of one of our trips, because look what happens next. They're riding or paddling on the river. Suddenly, as we came around this bend in the river, the sun came out through a hole in the clouds. A big rainbow spread across the sky. And here they are. Oh, they do some fishing. Hi, friends who are watching this story. Thanks for being here. The rainbow faded away and fish started to jump all around us. We got the fishing lines baited and into the water. Sam caught the first fish. Then I caught one. Then Aunt Rosie caught 2 in a row. Afterwards, we spread out our things to dry on a sandy beach. And like I said before, it reminds me exactly. I can remember being on the Marion River in the Adirondacks, and that rain came down, and then the wind stirred up, and we were able to just hang up everything once we got to our campsite, and everything dried in the wind and the sun. Okay, here they are back on their way. What Mom and Aunt Rosie like to do best is take the canoe through fast-moving water. They can follow all the curves of the current, and that's the way the water is moving. In the afternoon, we canoe without stopping. Sam and I paddle too. It's nice that's how people learn how to paddle. They have a chance to do it, and that's how they learn. Oh my, look at what's here. Wow. Can you recognize this animal? With a baby. Look at that animal. We came to a place where the river spread out through a meadow. Grass grows right out of the water, and we canoed in the grass. It came up over our heads and hit us. Aunt Rosie put her hand over my mouth so I wouldn't frighten away the moose and her calf. But even so, when they got wind of us, they ran right back into the woods. So when she said they got wind of us, that meant that they could smell the humans, and they knew they needed to leave that area. And here's another nighttime picture. When we discovered this island, we all agreed it was the place to spend our third night. We planned to sleep out right under those trees. The tent is up just in case of rain. The Big Dipper is out. The Milky Way is spread right across the sky. There isn't one mosquito because of the breeze. Oh yeah, a good breeze can keep the bugs away, that's for sure. And here, I just kind of drew in a picture of the Milky Way. The Milky Way, the Milky Way is a huge river of stars, but this is the Big Dipper. So the Big Dipper is 7 stars that you can see in the sky if it's clear, and in the north sky, any time of the year, if you're in the northern hemisphere. You can see it every season. Not every constellation is viewable from where you live all year round. Like a lot of people know Orion, the hunter, and we can only see him here in the Northeast in the winter. But you can see the Big Dipper, that constellation. It's like a picture made from stars, and you can see it all year round. I know the challenge for Seatuck for today is to look at the sky tonight. Maybe you'll see the Big Dipper. Okay, another interesting, oh my goodness, look what happened. The breeze that dried everything turned into a wild wind in the middle of the night. Mom says it was almost hurricane strength. We caught the tent. Oh my goodness, there's the tent trying to fly away. And you can see the dark shape of someone running after it, because now it's dark out, so we can't see them. We caught the tent and the canoe. Oh my goodness, the canoe was right there laying in the water, getting pulled by the wind. Just before the wind carried them off down the river, we did lose 1 pot and 1 cup. We spent the rest of the night curled up in the bushes. The branches creaked and whooshed all night long. Whew, a night to remember. Very exciting. Okay, in the morning, now we see some birds. Looks like things are looking a little better. In the morning, we can't believe it's the same river. It's so still. Twigs and leaves and flowers float around us as we start our last day on the river. I guess everything got blown in the water, including twigs and leaves and flowers from the big wind. We watch a muskrat swimming. Oh, there he is. He's swimming. A heron dives for a fish. That's this picture. Here he is. He's flying. Great blue heron. There he goes. And he dives. And look at what's in his beak. He got it. He's got a good meal. And here's a picture of a great blue heron. And that's, if you see him standing on the side of the river, that's pretty much what it'll look like. One of my favorite birds, actually. And it looks like they did see some other birds. We've got a whistling swan, a mallard duck. That's the male with the beautiful green head, very colorful, and a Canada goose. And here they are. Oh, I didn't finish reading the last line. We fed crumbs to the ducks. Cows watch us having a river visit. Now take a look at this. You see the cows? They're all lined up in a herd, looking at them on the river. So funny. There they are, the cows, watching them. Okay, we canoe through a town. We come to a low stone bridge. Sam gets excited. He stands up to wave. Mom yells, "Sit down!" I reach over and pull him down. And I do remember a trip that we were on. Actually, it was on Long Island. It was, I think, over on the Connecticut River, perhaps. Anyway, we had the tide changes. So the water basically, at one point in the day, is low, and in another point of the day, the river is very high. So we had set out, and we knew that the tide was going to get higher, and we literally had to, we saw that we were approaching the bridge. We were coming back, almost finished. The water had gotten so high that we had to paddle really fast and lay down in the canoe so we could fit under the bridge. And here's a picture I have from when we were in a canoe. And there's the tip of the canoe at the bottom of the page, and we were approaching a bridge. I don't know if that doesn't look like the one where we had to duck our heads, but I will always remember that, paddling and having to squeeze under to be able to get under the bridge because the tide had gone up. Always important to notice that when you are on a river. Okay, so meanwhile, remember that Sam got excited and he stood up? Well, Aunt Rosie and Mom had to brace hard on the other side to keep the canoe and everything in it from turning over. Yikes, but Sam, look! Sam ended up in the water. He swam to the rope that Aunt Rosie threw out to him, and we towed him to shore. Mom doesn't say much, but she looks upset. Aunt Rosie looks scared. Sam changes to dry clothes, and we move canoe on. Yeah, he has his life jacket on. That's very important. And it is important not to stand up in a canoe without being super careful because it can tip over. If you're careful, it won't tip. Okay, so here we go. Getting near the end of our traveling. It looks like they went under a bridge. Just past the train bridge, Aunt Rosie asks Sam to stand up and see what's ahead. He gets up as though the canoe were a baby's cradle. He's being really careful now. He reports that the river is ending in a big lake. He says it looks like the edge of the world on the other side. Aunt Rosie says that's because we're coming to a town. Mom points the canoe to cross the lake. There's no current, and the wind is against us. I'm glad it's slow going. Because you know why he's glad they're going slowly? Because he knows when they get to the other side of the lake, the trip will be over. He was sad about that because he was having such a good time. Here we are, taking our canoe onto the bank. Aunt Rosie showed me on the map where the river goes from here. She says it travels on through rocky places with lots of rapids. Someday, after lots of practice, we can go there. Yeah, rapids are areas where the ground is a hill, and the water goes very fast down the hill, and you don't want to get hurt as you're going through fast water. There could be a lot of rocks, so you really have to practice for that type of paddling. So there they are on the bank of the river with all their gear. And do you remember the promise that he made to his cat? But now we must catch a fish for my cat Six Toes. And Aunt Rosie is going to talk with other campers and find a lift back to our car, Ladybug, so we can get home tonight. Mom says canoeing back up the river against the current would be very hard, even if we had time. Right, if you're paddling and the water is running the same way as you, it's a lot easier paddling. But if the water's coming against you, it's a harder paddle. Look what Six Toes has. He must be home. The group has made it home. Way past midnight, we turn into our own street. One by one, we stumble into the house. I go to sleep to the sound of Six Toes chewing on his fish. It seems I can still hear the sound of the river running over the rocks. That's kind of like, I know when I've been on trips like that, or I've been maybe cross-country skiing and looking at the ground, and I'll close my eyes at night and I'll see my skis going through the snow. It's like a nice thing when you close your eyes to remember what you saw during the day. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. I'll just do a quick, here they are with their paddle. I'll just do a quick run through again of some of the pictures I showed in the beginning, if anybody missed them. This was some actual canoe trips. Here's one in North Carolina where the trees grow right out of the water. And then I was mentioning that in addition to canoes, a lot of people now choose to use kayaks. So here's the kayak paddle, where canoe paddle, you just hold and paddle. The paddle part is one side, and there Gary in the back, and the stern is paddling on the opposite side of the canoe. But with the kayak, you actually paddle yourself on both sides, this side and that side. So you can see it a little better here, both sides. The kayak sometimes kayaks are made for two people or just one. And then just a quick look again at the equipment, some of the camping equipment we've used, the Sierra Club cups you could use for a cup or a bowl, the old pot for water, the egg holder, the bug net, and one of my favorites, this is an old diaper, cloth diaper, clean one of course, new, that was new, and I just sewed on a little strap so that my children, when they went into the public bathrooms when we were camping, could put this around their neck like a necklace and have their towel right at their fingertips instead of it laying on the floor. And of course, I had my model of a canoe. Put it down again. There's the, let's see, this is the stern. That's where the person who's steering sits. And there are the paddles. It's a little model of a canoe with little paddles. We have a canoe actually hanging in our garage, but this was easier to show you. And then this is where the person in the bow sits and paddles. And here are some paddles. This is what they look like. This is a big one for an adult. And then we have the shorter ones we bought for children. So again, thanks for joining us on the story time of 3 days on a river in a red canoe by Vera Williams. And remember that Seatuck, which is in Islip, of course, on the South Shore of Long Island, has on its website activities every day at 2:30 for your enjoyment, usually out in the field. We couldn't be outside today. Way too windy. Oh, train going by. Way too windy. So we'll see you next time. And remember, the next story time will be Tuesday with Miss Michelle at 2:30, and then we'll be back again next Thursday. Hope to see you then. Thank you.